Happy Sunday, gang. Let's try to do this in one take. Later on, shoutouts, but first, this week in VEDS. Tessa, Caleb, I loved seeing your journals. I love that I am associated with journaling here in the VEDS community. It's very accurate. Caleb, I'm glad I could introduce you to asemic writing, not the practice of it, but the name for it. I think that there are a lot of us who probably do this and didn't know there was a word for it, but y'all, I encourage you to Google asemic writing and see what comes up, because there are people doing real cool things and creating really interesting scripts. Caleb, I also wanted to respond to your time displacement video where you asked about feeling nostalgia for specific events, and watched your video, and I was thinking about this a lot because I think it in some ways made me rethink my personal definition of nostalgia, and I'll tell you what I mean. Listen to your premise, and I was like, that just doesn't feel right. I feel like my nostalgia is triggered by really specific things. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I can sort of divide my nostalgia up into two categories. You've got like cultural nostalgia, which to me feels very general, very sort of vague. And that might be nostalgia for a particular fashion trend or style of music. Like if I rewatch Bring It On or Save the Last Dance or any film, like, from sort of the early 2000s era, I find myself really nostalgic for that style and for hip-hop music, and that's just like general cultural nostalgia. That's the kind of thing that could be marketed back to me. But when it comes to like my personal history and feeling nostalgic for a moment in my life, I often find that that's at least triggered by something really specific. And that might be triggered by a specific song or a smell or flipping through a scrapbook. And then once it's triggered by a specific event, the bubble of nostalgia might expand to include other things. So, for example, I have a friend and we used to have like a zine club and we'd mail things back and forth. And if I dive into my box of letters and I open a zine from her, I will feel this wave of nostalgia because I'll feel exactly how I felt when I first opened that zine, and I'll be kind of taken back to that moment in my life. That's like really time travel moment for me. But then the actual feeling of nostalgia is probably about more than the zine. It's about all of the zines that we exchanged. It's about the friendship with that person. It's the love that I had for them. And that nostalgia is very bittersweet. It's not just all about good feelings. The really specific nostalgia that's about a moment in my life is often sort of tinged with a little bit of sadness or more longing, and not just, oh yeah, I used to like that, but like, oh, I miss that period of my life. So anyways, those are some of my thoughts about nostalgia and time displacement. Also wanted to address something that Jeffrey said in response kind of to my video about bad habits, because Jeffrey was saying that he sometimes struggles with comparing his problems to other people's problems and minimizing his own problems because other people have it worse. And I wanted to say that I do that too, and I'm speaking totally from my own experience here, but one of the things I find hard about it is that I'm so grateful for my life, and it can feel ungrateful to be unhappy or to be struggling, knowing that I have things so good and that other people have it so much worse. And one of the things that has helped me with this is just having friends who I can be really honest with about how I'm feeling and trust that they will just take it at face value. I've had people in my life, well-meaning, wonderful people who love me, but who have minimized my feelings by trying to say, well, let's put this in perspective. That feeling will pass, or it's probably not as important as you think it is, or this is just temporary. And while all of that might be true, I've just found it supremely unhelpful because I'm stuck feeling the way that I'm feeling, and it can be really difficult to get perspective on it in the moment. And the thing that's been most helpful for me is having people in my life who just listen and say, I'm sorry. That sounds really hard. That sounds like it sucks. And I'm sorry you're experiencing that. I also try to have the same compassion for myself that I would have for my friends if they were in a similar situation, and that my friends have for me. And the last thing that I do, because I do try not to play the comparison game in general. I'm also a person who can get, jealous of other people's success or worry that I'm not where I'm supposed to be in my life. But one of the things that helps me is to say, okay, so yes, maybe other people have it worse, but can I be honest with myself in this moment and ask, am I happy? Am I free of pain? And if not, is this the version of myself that I want to be? Yes, maybe other people have it worse, but is this the version of myself that I want to be? Am I satisfied being this version of myself? And if not, what can I do to change it? And, finding some sort of action plan, and sometimes that's easiest to work out with someone else. Sometimes it can be hard to do by yourself. But, that to me is the thing that I think has helped snap me out of that mindset, is to not worry about where I'm at in comparison to other people, but where I'm at in comparison to where I want to be. Where is my best self? Where is the self that is the most engaged in my relationships and the most fulfilled in my life and at work, and is giving back to the world in the way that I want to, and is embodying the values that I hold. When I'm supremely anxious and stressed and avoiding things that I know I should be working on, that's not the best version of myself. And I know that. And sometimes I need help to deal with it. And so it might be that, being late on a project or getting really stressed or worked up about something, it's not as important as someone who is struggling with something else, with poverty or homelessness, but it's a real struggle for me, and it's preventing me from being my best self. Rambling thoughts. I think that's okay. Jeffrey, you always ramble, and I always think that that's okay, so I think y'all will think my rambling's okay. And that about wraps up my stuff for this week in VEDS that I wanted to respond to in video form. On to shoutouts. This week, my Sunday shoutouts are both Doctor Who related, because I am getting into the classic Doctor Who era, and that is what's bringing me joy in my life at this moment. And so if you're not a Doctor Who fan, you can shut this video off pretty much right now. But if you are a Doctor Who fan, here's 2 shoutouts for you. First up, Richard Carrier, aka Clever Dick Films, here on YouTube, is doing a Doctor Who review in parts. Essentially, he's making a documentary series that looks at the entire history of Doctor Who, not just as a television show, but as a cultural thing, as a property, as a fandom, and is looking at it. Each part in the series looks at a particular era. So it starts with the first Doctor, and then he's got second Doctor all the way up to the 9th Doctor, which is actually the video that I watched first, was about the Eccleston era and the reboot of the show in 2005. It was a great video, standalone video, but then I have since gone back and watched all of the videos in the series in sequence leading up to it, and that viewing experience is so much richer. He really is building up a whole history of Doctor Who in these videos, and if you're a fan of the show, it's a really great look at how we got the show that we did, and why, and what was happening behind the scenes, and also what cultural moments led to certain creative and production decisions. It's been really interesting. It's wonderfully, wonderfully put together, proper documentary style videos. I'm a big fan. Excellent work. As it turns out, couldn't do it in one take. The other thing I wanted to shout out was an audio story from Big Finish. So if you don't know Big Finish Productions, they produce audio dramas. They're well known for their Doctor Who series because they feature voice talent from the show. The actual actors who appeared in the television program Doctor Who will appear in these full cast audio dramas. And the dramas have been around for a long time. They helped to tide fans over during the wilderness years when the show was off the air. They've got a couple stories that are available for free on their SoundCloud. One such story is Urgent Calls, featuring Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor. The story takes place entirely across phone calls between the Sixth Doctor and an ordinary woman named Lauren in the 1970s, and they meet by chance. She calls the wrong number and happens to get the Doctor, which as it turns out is really lucky for her, and then it happens again, and again, and again, and she ends up helping the Doctor to solve this kind of mystery.
Hurry up, Mum. Pick it up.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Who's this?
Well, this is the Doctor.
You don't sound like you're at my mother's house.
No, I'm not. I'm in a telephone box.
Oh, sorry. I must have called a wrong number. That's strange. A wrong number just called me half an hour ago. You say you're in a phone box. What made you pick it up?
Well, I just walked past, the phone rang. There was nobody around, and I was rather intrigued.
Don't you get much intrigue in your life?
No, on the contrary, rather too much at times.
It's a short story. It entirely relies upon this relationship that develops between the Doctor and Lauren. And I really enjoy that because as much as I love the companions, it's really fun to get to know the Doctor through the eyes of an ordinary person who doesn't know anything about his world. And you get this sometimes in companion light stories and the television series. And this audio drama also made me think of The Runaway Bride, which is a Christmas episode from the modern series. It's the first episode where we meet Donna Noble before she becomes a companion. And over the course of the episode, she gets to know the Doctor and they start to form a kind of relationship or friendship. And it's fun to get to see the Doctor through the perspective of somebody new. So I really enjoyed this episode, Urgent Calls. I thought it was really well suited to be an audio drama. And if you are looking to get to know classic Doctors, specifically if you want to get to know the Sixth Doctor, this story is a much better place to start than the Twin Dilemma. Because, wow, I watched that this weekend, and yes, it's bad. I still kind of like it, but whew, as a way of introducing a brand new Doctor, I see why people have issues with it. It's got a lot going on. But I have now, I'm jumping around in classic era, and I started with Colin Baker because I had listened to this audio story, and I was like, well, maybe I'll watch his stuff. But actually, I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is I've hopped back to the start of Tom Baker's era, and that's what I'm watching, and that's what I'm going to watch in a moment when I turn the camera off. So that's it for this Sunday, gang. It's been a great week. God, I can't believe we're on day 20 of VEDS, only 10 days to go. Having a great time with it. I hope you enjoyed my Doctor Who rambles today. I mean, I really think that you should just embrace joy wherever you get it from. And for me, watching the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith running around the universe, solving and creating problems, I mean, that's joy for me. All right, I'll see all of you tomorrow. And until then, my friends and fellow VEDSies, good night.